Hello and welcome. My name is Frederick, and today we're going to have a look at a bench for Nordic hamstring curls and how to make it. Now, I have around me here a selection of the tools that I'm going to be using for this project. I have some wood here. But first off, why is it that you would want to make this project? And what is it for specifically? So, Nordic hamstring curls, which is what this tool is primarily intended for, is an exercise that primarily hits the back side of the body, which is to say the hamstrings, but also the calf muscles that crosses the knee. Obviously, there's other things working at the same time. Now, this exercise is quite hard to do, even in a well-equipped gym, and certainly at home if you don't have a very specific apparatus to do it with. But making that apparatus is rather simple, it's quite easy, and it's definitely cheap. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this project, just to show that it's very doable and it's very worthwhile. So let's get into some of the things that you will need to make this project. So over here I have wood, and I'll put in the little description below the wood that I end up using and the specific dimensions of it, though I will say that it doesn't matter so much. Just get an idea of how I do the construction process, and then get pieces of wood, or take pieces of wood that you already have and adapt it to this project. So it's not set in stone, and I'm making do with pieces of wood that I had from other things, and that's kind of what I want to get across here, is not to go and spend a lot of money on high grade or very specific sizes of wood. It's not really the what is intended here. Most of the wood here can be whatever. There's only a few pieces of wood here that's really, it's quite crucial that they're strong or that they are a specific type. So I'll just highlight one, and that is this thing. So this is, I think it's a handle for a shovel. What we're interested in here is the fact that it's round, which we're going to anchor our feet with this. For that reason, I like it to be round, rather than just having a plain old square piece of wood. It does give us a little bit of problems in the construction process, but I'll talk about that later on. Shovel handle is probably the cheapest way to get around this. You can also sometimes get them dowels that are thicker. The most important thing is the thickness and the strength of the thing. So this is possibly the only place where you want to get as strong as possible, and even if you could get a hardwood dowel, this one is probably, I think it's 37 millimeters, and you need to get up into that sort of dimension because it is the piece of wood that will make or break the whole project, so to speak. So this is a little bit important. The rest is make do with what you can find. So that's it. Let's look at the tools that we're going to be using. Alright, so here we have the tools that we're going to be using, and keeping it very basic, simple handheld saw, obviously a little pencil to make the markings on the wood you're going to be cutting. Also make a note of there is a ruler integrated into the saw, so that's fine. The other thing is a drill. With the drill you'll need an assortment of drills to make pre-drills to make it easier to put in the screws. Also we'll need bits that fit with the screws. So that's all very basic. The last things that I want to talk about here is two more specific special tools. They're not that expensive, but they will make things a lot easier. So the first thing here is this drill. I'll see if I can bring it a little bit closer. This is called a spade drill, I believe, and it has a much wider dimension than a normal drill. So the biggest drill here, wood drill, is 8 millimeter. This is 37, 38 millimeters. And that allows us to make a hole that has the dimensions of the wood I was talking about earlier. to fit that in place. There's other ways to make a round hole. You can make multiple little holes with drills and then cut it out, but it's generally a pain to do, and it's much easier to just get this one, and it's cheap, especially if you only need to get one and you know the dimensions. So definitely a worthwhile addition. The other thing is this bit here. These actually go together. This goes into the drill, and it has this kind of like here, has like a Velcro on the underside, and it accepts sandpaper. So because we'll be working with quite large pieces of wood, if we want to sandpaper it, it's much quicker to just put this thing into a drill and then off we go. This is cheap, like this is only a few euros. Sandpaper is the price of normal sandpaper, so it's relatively cheap, and because we already need the drill, it makes sense rather than having to go buy a specific machine for sandpapering things. So it's not absolutely necessary, but it's quite good. Otherwise, if you can't find it or don't want to get it, just use normal sandpaper or do the same. Might take a little bit longer, but it will get the job done as well. So that's the tools that we're going to be using, and let's get into the actual construction process. So at this point we're ready to start cutting the wood. You note here that the wood is sliding a little bit for me, so I move the kettlebell closer to where I'm making the cut. Makes for greater stability. Yeah, and here I have to hold on to the kettlebell because the wood is a little bit bent, so holding the wood in place in this way makes for an easier cutting experience. Also note that I'm dropping the saw a little bit as I'm making the cut to help guide the cut, as I'm doing here. Then we move into cutting the posts or the upright, which is what will hold the dowel in place. And note here that dimension is bigger than for the board or the support part of the bench. So these have to hold more force. And here we have the dowel, and it's sliding a little bit all over the place, so I have to sit on it to make it stay as I make the cut. And we move into the screwing things together. So I pre-drill everything, just makes for easier screwing things together. I also countersink so the screws don't touch the floor, and everything is coming together nicely. So in this bit I'm using a luggage strap, the orange bit here, to hold the pieces of wood together as I make the pre-drills, and that just makes everything sit together more easily. Again, countersinking everything, and then the screws go in. And now we move into the post. So here I'm using the spade drill I was talking about, and this is making that bigger dimension hole that will eventually hold the wooden dowel. Now this bit requires some concentration and some hard work. I found out by trial and error that it's easier, see I'm not doing it this way this time, it's easier to drill all the way through rather than try to make it meet in the middle. So here I'm just going all the way through, and it's giving better results. And this is the whole thing put together, the post and the dowel coming together nicely. So here I have a drill, and I put some marking tape on it. And I've done this because the post that I want to secure to the board is too thick for the screws that I have lying around. That is, the screws will not go all the way through the post. So I'm going to drill about halfway through the post as I'm doing here. The tape just makes sure that I don't drill too far, and that will allow me to use the screws that I had lying around. So not absolutely necessary, it's just making ends meet, so I can use the screws that I had available at the time. So at this point we are basically ready to put everything together. So I'm pre-drilling through the post with a smaller diameter drill, countersinking the holes, and then putting the screws in place, securing the post. And then we move on to the other side. So same process, pre-drilling, countersinking, and then screws go in. So beyond this, we're moving into the finishing touches, which is to say the sanding of the bench. Here I'm using the drill with the extension that I was talking about earlier. I'm just going to remove splinters, but you could obviously take this further if you wanted to. You could also add wax or varnish if you wanted to really make it look neat, but I'm just removing splinters. Alright, so here is the Nordic bench finished. I added an extra piece of wood across just to give it more stiffness and less flex. I also screwed in screws here and here to keep the dowel from twisting and moving when we're doing the exercise. And then obviously just sanded the rest of the thing, and that's it. Yeah, and let's have a look at some of the movements that you can do with this thing. The most obvious use for the Nordic bench is obviously Nordic hamstring curls, which is to say this eccentric movement. Well, that's primarily how it's used. So you lower under control and then you help yourself up somehow. Eventually you want to get to the point where you can do it without having to use the hands to help you back up. But I still have some work to do on that in that department. But that's why I built the bench in the first place. So, but this is the classic lowering Nordic. Second option, and slightly easier, is to just bend at the waist. So you want to keep the hips at a certain point and then just bend at the waist. As you get stronger, you can obviously move the hips further forward. So this second variation is somewhat easier, but also surprisingly difficult. So yeah, that's it. This is obviously not the only way to build a bench to be used for Nordics. It's just a general schemata, and then my suggestion is to take that idea and then apply it to what you have available. So it just to give some idea of how it could be approached. So that's it. If you enjoyed this video, then consider hitting that little like button or subscribe. That would help me out tremendously, and thank you for watching.